Hi, everyone. I was recently reading a story about a leadership consultant that was asked by his CEO to change the company's culture. Easy, right? And then this HR consultant learned that this company had a terrible, terrible reputation, one of the worst reputations. And in fact, the CEO said that one day he had a client meeting with an external client, and he had an employee that he insisted come with him to the meeting. But guess what? It was her wedding day. And he said, you know what, it doesn't really matter. What we'll do is we'll have this meeting with this external client early in the morning so that you can run home and get married. Guess who heard that story? Pretty much everyone, right? People in the company heard it, the client probably heard it, and you know that it was a talk at the wedding party. So then the CEO said, what should we do about this? How do we start to change the culture? It's such a big culture and something really amazing that we have to do. How do we start? And what the consultant said is, don't start by changing the performance management system. Don't start by changing the reward system, the benefit system, any of those systems yet. Start by changing the stories. Find dramatic, story-worthy things that people are doing that support the culture that you want to emphasize. So for instance, one company that I know of wanted to increase the speed over perfection. And what the person did who wanted to make sure that this was starting was sent out an email discussing speed over perfection, and it was riddled with errors and typos, and it was a funny email. Another manager that I personally work with gave everybody on her team a mug, but she hastily wrapped it. She said, the gift is the mug. The wrapping is not what matters. And finally, if you want to have a more employee-centric culture, then give the bride or groom the day off. Better yet, give them the week off. But stories are not anything new. We know about Aesop's fables, we know about Hans Christian Andersen, we even know about the cavemen who used to draw the pictures on the sides of the cave. But it happens to be a tool that most HR colleagues don't use to their advantage as much as they should, or as much as they could. I have the pleasure of working at Girl Scouts, and so we see girls every day, and it often serves as a reminder to me when I'm watching the girls how engaged and engrossed they get in stories when they're listening to them, when they're telling them, and when they're learning from them. So how can we use these to our advantage? Well, I was reading a book recently, and it was called Married White Female Seeks Best Friends Forever by somebody named Rachel Birch. And Rachel was a happily married newlywed who moved from New York City to Chicago. And in doing so, she lost a lot of the good friends that she had, at least that she could see on a daily basis. So she set out on having 52 girl dates, is what she called them, one a week. And what she also found was that the people that she clicked with were ones that would tell stories. So whether the stories were newsworthy stories or engaging or funny or you'll never guess what just happened kinds of stories, those were the people that she clicked with, as opposed to the raw exchange of information, the interviewing of each other. Now, isn't that similar to when we're interviewing a candidate? Very often you can see from the resume if they can do the work. Frankly, I don't think the work is the hard part of doing work. What the hard part is finding the right fit. So the more that we can tell stories to each other about what it's like to work around here, the better. People are not interested in data dumps. We all know the different presentations that we've seen that are eye charts full of lots and lots of Excel figures and facts. That's not what resonates with people. What resonates is putting all of this data into a story that the person can follow, because it has an emotional connection with people. There are two pitfalls that I want to bring up about telling stories. And the first one, let's just call the Trojan Horse issue. If we remember back to the issue of the taking over of the city of Troy, the Greeks and the Trojans had been at war for over a decade, and the Greeks weren't winning. So what they did was they built this tremendous horse, and they hid in the belly of the horse, and then they pretended to sail away. They offered the horse as a gift to the gods and a gift to the Trojans to say, you guys win, we're going home. And then at night, the Trojans pulled the horse into their city limits. The Greeks came out of the belly of the horse and took over the city. How that relates to the storytelling is that stories are often a vehicle that's considered a gift. So we're giving people the gift of the story, but it's a vehicle often for the storyteller to be either persuasive or manipulative within the belly of the story. Now, is that a good thing or a bad thing? I'm not sure, but it's certainly a caution. The second caution, I'll say, is about story fragments. This is one of my favorite things to think about. You know when you sometimes hear a fragment of a story, the middle of a story, and people then create the context around that story. They either talk about the beginning of the story and the end of the story, and they weave in what this fragment is. Again, it may be something that you want, and it may be something that you don't want. There was once an executive who walked into somebody's office and said, your walls are green, mine are beige. And then he left. Well, what do you think happened within the next couple of hours? They painted the office. And who needs another beige office, right? So what this person was thinking when he painted his office was, I'm not quite sure what this message was. Is it that to be successful here, you have to have a beige office? Was he commenting that my office looked better or worse? But he created a context around it that may or may not have been what was being said. But it's not enough to tell stories. What we also need to do within HR is to be able to elicit stories from others too. I was at a party last weekend. It was a birthday party for a friend, and I thought she did something really creative that perhaps we can use too. She gave everybody a name tag, and on the name tag, we actually wrote how we knew this person, how we had met her. And what was fun about this is that this was a big party, lots of people didn't know each other, but it was a conversation starter. And when we have conversation starters, we're actually showing interest in other people by asking them to tell us their stories, but then that person's also showing us their vulnerability by discussing the story with us. Now, we certainly can do this within HR. Our name tag, and not just our department, but maybe a book we read, maybe one of our company values that most resonates with us. Any of those kinds of things would be good. And frankly, that's part of the reason why we use open-ended questions, to get these stories from each other. You know, if we think back to that poor bride that was working on her wedding day, there may be somebody who wants that kind of environment. Maybe somebody wants to be that results-oriented, that driven by the client meetings, that it's okay if they get married in between client meetings. But the beauty of the story is we put the story out there and we let them make their own conclusions. Again, it's all about the fit. So what kind of stories can we tell in HR? Well, our kind of work really lends itself to storytelling. If we think about the press brochures that we do on people, that can be a nice story. If we think about the web copy that we have about our company, having testimonials from people is a great thing. If you're a rewards person and you're looking for a new reward system, to elicit stories about people doing the story-worthy things that we support is a great thing. If you're a learning professional and you're talking about a new sales competency or a new sales skill, how did that help the person get extra money and bring revenue to the company and become a trusted advisor? And if you're a benefits person, to talk about what kind of benefits package you have that met a particular need and what the outcome was, it's all really good. And who said that any of these stories needed to be riveting? Because they don't. They need to be learning points for us. So the benefits story will work. So now we're at the end of the presentation, but rather than think of this as the end in a formal sense or in the sense of, say, a story, I'd rather think of this as the once upon a time. So what is the once upon a time that people are telling about your company? And is it the once upon a time story that you want them to tell, or is it not? And then let's think about ourselves. What's the once upon a time story that you're telling about yourself or that other people are telling about you? And if it's not the one that you want, what are the kinds of things that you can do to shift it? So I leave you with the simple question of, what's your story? Thank you.